I think that something that would be an easy lift that would make a really big difference is for firms to take the time to develop a call path. So, not a script. We're pretty anti scripts. We'll provide scripts, but the goal is to get off the script as soon as possible. What we mean by call path is like key points, right, of the things that the intake team will hit on if they're on the call with a prospect. That way it's consistent every time. We listen to calls all the time where you'll have a rock star intake specialist will score the highest score on a call, and then on the next one, forget to explain the contingency fee. It happens.
Of course.
People get distracted, things come up in their lives, and their performance will fluctuate. They're human.
That's the biggest thing. The biggest thing is like a firm will be like, but I have this intake specialist, she's amazing. And I'm like, yeah, but they're still human.
Mhm.
And if they also know that there's no one watching, monitoring, right? Quality control. If they're having a bad day because they got in a fight with their husband or boyfriend or, something happened, right? They're human and they could have off days, off weeks, off months. And when do you want to catch it? Do you want to catch it on day 1, day 7, or day 200?
What we find is that if you have a quality control system in place, so what does quality control mean is an actual protocol that's on schedule, that's never missed, where we listen to calls, score them, provide feedback in real time. We're looking at the cases that we didn't sign up. Why? We know exactly why we didn't sign them up, right? We're looking for these opportunities and we're finding them within 48 hours, right? Versus day 200.
Yep.
But your biggest rock stars are going to make mistakes. Mistakes are okay. Sometimes they may not even realize that they are regressing or, maybe missing some best practices, because if you are a high volume firm, you're getting some intake specialists maybe processing 30 calls, 35, 40 calls a day. So forgetting to go through the contingency fee, if you're just kind of going off of your experience and, just knowing the process, is actually pretty understandable. But if you have a call path that's, this is a system, this is a checklist, it's right in front of you, it becomes just secondhand, what is it called? Like secondhand nature, right? They just know that this is that process versus one particular intake team member might have some pre-lit experience, so she kind of just knows to ask these questions. It's best to have everyone follow that same process every single time to ensure that we're providing every single potential client with the same type of service, providing them with the same type of guidance. One thing that we also see and hear a lot is something that should be included in this call path where intake specialists will sometimes forget to just explain the process. They'll just forget the part.
That's crazy.
I know. It's very common, Maria.
Now, how many rings should it take? And I don't know if we have enough time to get into like the whole phone tree scenarios and like what provides the best user experience, right? So first, let's start with how many rings until it's picked up.
So I'm honestly going to give if you can pick up the phone in the second ring, pick up the phone on the second ring, set up your systems, set up your team, make sure that you have an after hours call center if you're not staffed up, right?
Is there one that you like?
They're
the best or the worst. But
I think it's an industry thing. It's hard, but there are a lot of great ones. We have.
You don't want to name them?
So right now, I think Intake Solutions of America is doing a really good job for some of our mutual clients.
Okay.
So they seem to be doing a good job at the moment. And Go Answer has done a good job for some of my clients in the past as well.
Okay.
And I know that some are happy with Smith AI.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
Yeah.
I've also, the one that I've recently been recommending is Legal Conversion Center.
I actually have a client who just got Legal Conversion Center.
LCC.
Yes.
Yeah. But I need to talk to all of them. I want to.
I don't have a lot of, I haven't worked with them before.
What I don't like is only giving the client one option, because then if it goes poorly, it's going to reflect back on me. And I've always said, like, look,
yes,
it's not that necessarily I want to put all the blame on like a call center. I just think that's a really, really fucking hard job. Like to run a call center,
it is.
to be, it's just, it's hard. And like, I just think that you really are looking for like, who's the best of the worst, and not because of anything necessarily that's their fault. I just think it's inherently like impossible. Like no one's going to do intake better than setting it up correctly in-house, period. And don't get me wrong, if you call LawRank, half the time it's going to go to an answering service, right? Half the time it'll ring to someone, but half the time it won't. But what we do is not as time sensitive as what you guys do or what law firms do, right? Not you. Okay, so 2 rings is what I say as well. The other thing is, like we just had this with a mutual client where it's ringing to one person. Then if that person doesn't pick up, it goes to the rest of the team or to another person. I can't remember. So now it's creating all these rings, right? As opposed to the phone ringing at multiple desks at once. Like, what are your feelings on that? And what kind of phone trees should law firms set up? And before we even go into that really quickly, how do you feel, before I forget, about phone rings? Press 1 if you're an existing client, press 2 if you're a new client.
Okay, so this is going to be an unpopular opinion too.
I love unpopular opinions.
I know how SEO agencies feel about phone trees, but so this is what my experience and what my perspective is about the call routing system and phone trees. So if you have a call tracking number set up, just route your LSA calls to the intake team pod. It's going to skip.
I agree with that.
Right? It skips the receptionist. It skips the having to go through a phone tree.
I agree with that.
So we always opt for that, right?
Yes.
Because you're going to save rings and they're going to get to the team as quickly as possible. And if that team does not answer within a couple rings, then we can move into our overflow structure, whether that's a call center, right? Or maybe a paralegal that's a backup, which we actually don't recommend either because they're busy and they may not follow up on that lead. So we recommend pointing them directly to the departments when necessary. A phone tree actually helps with that. But I think the reason that a lot of people hate phone trees is because it sounds so mechanical, right? So we love to help our clients set up a highly personalized phone tree if they opt in for one, where the managing partner's voice is, he's using his own voice, where he's welcoming them to the firm. If they're calling about an existing case, press 1, or a new case, press 2. And even when they're holding, they're listening to maybe audio of maybe a commercial that they've done that has like a client testimonial or their value propositions, because unfortunately, sometimes you do have to be placed on hold.
Yes.
But why not make it a hero's journey?
I love
while
that.
they're waiting.
I absolutely love that.
So I think that if we make the tour, a little bit more personal, it becomes less of a negative experience. So I think phone trees are great when you make it like the most elevated experience.
I love that. Now, how do you feel about the firms that have a receptionist that then routes the call, right? And what I run into is that the receptionist will pick up the phone. Now, they're not an intake specialist. They're literally just the phone router, right? And they get on the phone with someone that is just dying to tell them about their case. And they just start regurgitating. And then the receptionist either lets them talk or interrupts them. And I don't think there's even a good way, period, to handle this, because if you let them talk, now they're going to have to repeat their story. If you interrupt them, they're going to find that you're rude. So obviously, clearly you can tell how I feel about it, but how do you feel about it?
So we teach our intake teams call control, and we have very specific training for receptionists. What we do is what we advise is that when a receptionist is taking a call and asking, is this about a new case or an existing case? If they say new case, the first thing that they say and do is set an expectation. Thank you, Maria, for calling us about your new case. I'm going to transfer you to an intake specialist who's going to, ask you the questions about this case, and they're going to be able to help you with that. What I'm going to do is just take your name and number, just in case we get disconnected, before I transfer you over. You get it in terms of what the expectation is before they have the ability to share. You're not always going to have that opportunity because someone may steamroll, right? And just move on to the call.
What about just, and I'm thinking out loud, but right when they pick up the phone, saying something like,
are you calling about a new or existing case?
Well, are you calling, could you please tell me if you're calling about a new or existing case so I can best know how to transfer your call. Like saying it in the introduction, somehow like getting it in there. So hopefully something clicks in that person's head of like, I'm going to be transferred.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So that's interesting because a phone tree does that in a lot of ways,
Yes,
right?
it does.
Except for you have, a real person asking that question.
Right.
But you have a little bit more control with the phone tree because they know what to expect. So I think that the goal is to set an expectation and you can, modify the script so that you can, ensure that they know that I'm not the person that's going to be taking this information. And the goal is to be able to set that expectation before you even collect their phone number.
What do you think is better? Phone rings to all the intake specialists, none are available. Should it go to the paralegals who are in the middle of doing something and they're distracted? And it's so hard, in my opinion. And I hear this in intake where they're still working on whatever it is they're working on, even during the intake, because it's so, and I'm not, I can relate. I think when you're in the middle of doing something and then like, my kid walks in and they want something and I'm just like, I'm not listening to you right now. And I literally have to turn to my kid and be like, hey, I want to give you the attention that like this deserves. I'm in the middle of something. I can't do that for you right now, but I do want to give you that attention, right? Obviously they can't, a paralegal can't do that on the phone with. So is it better for it to go to a paralegal that might not be able to turn that switch off and then the new switch on, or for it to just go to after hours?
I actually have a very strong opinion about this.
Oh, good. I love strong opinions.
I always want to be diplomatic, though.
No, fuck that. This is not the podcast to be diplomatic. People do not listen to this that get offended easily because they would just like live offended.
So there's something to be said about transferring a call that means that it could be more work for someone, right? And then giving them the power to make the decision of whether this is a new work order, essentially, if we're putting it in those terms, right? So if a paralegal is busy and they have a responsibility, it's really not fair for them either to have to stop what they're doing and then process an intake and then be expected to follow up on that intake. They're most likely going to miss best practices to maybe enter it into the system, which we see all of the time. They're just trying to get it off. They're trying to get back to what they were doing. They may not enter it into the system, so it doesn't go into this follow-up funnel. Or in the event that they feel that they are overworked at that moment, they may set a higher criteria than the firm has in order to reject the case because they don't want to open another file.
Thank you. I was hoping you would hit on this.
Yeah.
Because there's reason why people that are going to work on the case, especially if they're not vested in it, like obviously if you're a partner or the owner, shouldn't have to sign up the case because now it's like, oh, here's another case where I'm going to have more work, right? And that's the reality of things, right? It's like, I don't even want to get into it, but I feel very strongly about it too.
It's true. And that's why I have a very strong opinion about it.